Yes. Great. So thanks for introduction. And I'm going to talk today with you about revealing the secrets of high availability and happy ops. So I just wanted to start my talk today with a quote, which is saying that one of the primary skills I look for in an engineer is laziness. It's once Dave O'Connor from the SRE team in Google said. So short introduction again, my name is Nataliya Remez. I was born in Moldova, raised in Ukraine, and now I live in Stockholm, Sweden. I work as a tech manager leading the SRE and cloud infrastructure teams at a company called iZettle. So iZettle is actually building a full cycle point of sale solution for small and micro merchants across Europe and Latin America. Recently, the company was acquired by PayPal, and this is super exciting times for us, and we're trying to launch also in US. Regarding my experience, I actually came from the software engineering background, in industry for more than 12 years, taken different positions. And right now, as I said, I work as a tech manager, so mostly people responsibility, strategy, vision, and SRE and cloud infrastructure. So let's move on. I would like just to start with a quite common question this day. So what is actually DevOps? And if you look at the history of the term itself, it was first coined in 2009 at one of the first DevOps days, actually, which was held in Belgium, Ghent. And if you look at the challenges since then, because it's like 11 years past, last year it was 10, so we still have a DevOps as a job title. We still have DevOps teams working in silos. Sometimes we even see situations when people are stating that they don't need ops anymore. And unfortunately, there is not much time for experimenting for the teams. If you look again at DevOps, you might notice that it's a lot of tools discussions everywhere. It's about, do we want to use Kubernetes or not? If we want to use GCP or AWS, which cloud is better, and stuff like that. But essentially, if you think about it, it's still mostly about mindset and the culture, which should be shared across all organizations. As one Martin Fowler also stated, DevOps actually is a culture which encourages collaboration and shared responsibility. But if you look at the reality, many operations teams are actually struggling with different challenges these days. Some of them are basically responsible for the whole infrastructure stack of the company. And it's good if you're already in the cloud, but if you have, let's say, approach when you have a data center somewhere and also you have a different cloud providers, most probably your operations team is quite busy with actually taming those dragons. Also, there is a misconception of the DevOps as a job role. So as you can see on this slide, we think that we just can hire more DevOps engineers and this is it. This is how we're going to implement this new thing in our organization. But unfortunately, it's not only that. And as I said before, it's actually not a job or role, it's rather mindset. Another interesting story about many organizations these days is how they actually treat production incidents. And again, usually if you look at what happened, there is a lot of scapegoating or blame games happening inside the organization between different management levels. And instead of actually learning on those incidents, most of the organizations are busy in the political games. Also, there are some common pitfalls well described in the team topologies book and the website, which you can see on the screen. There are some of them which I wanted to describe a bit. So in some organizations, which is called anti-type A separate silos, we see that operations teams still work in their own silo, probably managing whole organization infrastructure and just receiving tickets from development teams through some service desk. There is sometimes another anti-type, which is called separate DevOps silos. So it's like, again, we're creating a new team, just hiring DevOps engineers in that team, and then we think we're fine. And another antitype is called we don't need operations anymore. So let's just move everything from operations to development teams and just pretend that it's going to work for developers. So my point here is that any kind of transformation rely on the culture of the organization, first of all. As once Mel Conway said, and now it's commonly known as a Mel Conway's law, is organizations which design systems are constrained to produce designs which are copies of the communication structures of these organizations. So, and here I would like to remind a very well coined DevOps actually framework, which was first introduced by Jess Humble. He is very famous in the DevOps world for the books he written and the State of DevOps survey. It's called Kelms. So if you look at it, and again, it was actually introduced in the beginning of DevOps era, it's mostly focused on the mindset or the cultural values. So actually it's abbreviation for culture, automation, lean, measurement, and sharing. If you look at each of the pillars, you can see some actually basics of the DevOps mindset and DevOps culture. So culture stands for the shared responsibility in the organization for operational problems. Automation stands for team members seek out ways to automate as many tasks as possible and are comfortable with the idea of continuous delivery. Lean means that we need to work in the agile way with certain iterations and also have a possibility to actually visualize our work in progress, limit sometimes work in progress, and manage queue and manage incoming work. Then it's a measurement, which is stating that you basically have to have a way to monitor your production metrics or actually have those metrics at the first place. And it should be visible within all organization and into all systems. And then last but not the least is called sharing. So sharing is actually, in my opinion, should be on the top of this list because it's stating that it's not only about sharing responsibility for the services on production, but also it's about user-friendly communication channels that encourage collaboration across organization, especially between development and operations. So just to summarize, according to this framework, DevOps is a cross-functional collaboration. DevOps doesn't solve tooling problems, but it solves human problems. And that DevOps isn't one team's job, it's actually everybody's job. So let's move on. And because my talk was also about SRE and actually how to introduce SRE and the challenges you might face, I wanted to start with actual definition of SRE, which is abbreviation for Site Reliability Engineering, first coined by Google. And if you look at the Wikipedia, it's saying so it's a discipline that incorporates aspects of software engineering and applies them to infrastructure and operational problems. So the main goal is to create scalable and highly reliable software systems. If you look at this definition from the development point of view, it's basically applying software development approaches to the operation. So also, this is my favorite definition, which I think many of you who used to be developers will quite clearly understand, is that if you look at the more like development definition, it's just class SRE implements interface DevOps. Which by using actually following methods like reduce organization silos, accept incidents as normal, leverage automation and tooling, and measure everything. So here I would like also to stop a little bit on the Google model, which is quite famous and was described initially in the famous SRE Google book. So as you can see, the idea of the SRE team in Google was that actually SRE team is responsible for production services when they are done and ready from the development. So they also introduced the process called handoff, which is the process of handing over the service from development team to SRE team with all proper testing done before. Which means also that the SRE team can actually reject the software with a substandard, for example, if it doesn't have unit tests or integration tests. And important here that not many organizations are on that level of maturity when they can actually introduce this kind of team and this kind of handover process. So also from SRE book, there are some interesting guiding principles, 7 of them, which I believe, and based on my experience, are helping a lot of companies to actually introduce the SRE role and responsibilities properly. I would like to start on each of them and maybe provide some more context. So first one is stating that operations is a software problem. And it's back to the statement that if we have, let's say, operation incident on production, it's not only operational engineer problem, or it's not only solely infrastructure part of things. You usually, of course, need to involve all the team who is responsible for the service as well. Or if you have a luxury to have SRE team focusing on that, that can be also the case. So the second principle stating that you should manage your services by service level objectives, or so-called SLOs. This one might be quite tricky based on my experience to implement, because it's you can see it as a type of metric for the service. And because SRE team usually can actually provide you 100% availability of your services, usually there is agreement of this percent between the team and the customers and the SRE. So for example, you can measure uptime of the service and say it's going to be available on the production for 99.97 or something like that. However, it's not necessarily needs to be defined in the beginning of your journey to the SRE. And then a third principle is saying that we need to work to minimize toil. Toil is basically some manual job which can be automated, or let's call it simply the waste. So, and this should be collaborative work. It's not only operations team who's supposed to work on the toil. And then we have a fourth principle, which is stating that automate this year's job away, which is actually, in another words, saying that we need to find some time and actually dedicate some time to automate recurring manual tasks or processes. And there are some different ways how to implement this. Usually you can spend, let's say, if you're following Scrum framework or something like that, you can dedicate some specific time in the sprint for the team to focus on the automation tasks, which are usually not so visible for the business or product part. And then fifth principle is move fast by reducing the cost of failure. This means that, for example, if you have a production incident and you want to reduce basically the time to recover from the production incident, this would be a good example of moving fast by reducing the cost of failure. So you can think about it also as a so-called metric, so-called MTTR, and it's just stating the well-known problem that the faster you can identify the problem in the product lifecycle, the faster, the less expensive it is to fix it. And then we have sixth principle: share ownership with developers. This, again, in my opinion, is quite important because historical operations team used to own a lot of stuff. But instead of having this ownership in one specific team in the organization, think about sharing ownership. So for example, even if your service is just on production, and let's say you have a SRE team who is continuously monitoring that service, still the ownership of the service itself is shared between SRE and the development team. And number 7, last but not the least, it's use the same tooling regardless of function or job title. This one I also would like to stop a little bit more because there are some specific examples. For example, if we want to have centralized monitoring or something like that, it's actually good to have one tool to do the job, but not necessarily it will fit all the development team's needs. So that is fine to have more tools, let's say just for function of monitoring. But ideally, you should unify the approach as much as you can, because then you can more easily scale and support your development teams with tools. So this was the SRE principles. And now I wanted a bit discuss the situation. What should we do when we are not Google? And are we even ready for this SRE? So I myself had experience introducing a SRE team in my current company, and I obviously learned it was a bumpy path, and I learned some things about the implementation of the concept, and I wanted to share it with you. I actually use as a guiding principles SRE implementation checklist, which I wanted to present to you and discuss a little bit further. So if you can see, this is basically the principles we just discussed, but some of them are mandatory and some of them are optional. So again, it's just my personal experience. You might argue with me and I will happily discuss it after my presentation. But in my humble opinion, the only 3 of presented principles should be mandatory for SRE to be implemented. Those are operations is a software problem, minimizing toil and share ownership. And the rest, like manage per SLO, automate, reducing cost of failure, and use the same tooling, might be optional and can be implemented later. So if you look also at some questions to ask, let's say regarding your current state of things in organization, so probably you should ask yourself those 4 questions. One of them would be, do you have documented procedure for production incidents? And if so, that's good, but this should be well described and accessible for everyone. It's also very well described in the Google SRE book. It's so-called incident management, practices, post-mortems, and all around those things. So practice to apply is incident management. Another question would be nice to ask yourself is, how do you learn from failure these days? So is there any learning session scheduled after incident, or is there any post-mortem session scheduled after the production incident? And do you actually use playbooks so that you can have a clear instruction on how to avoid the situation if it happens next time, and actually well-described processes for your tooling and systems? Another question is, do you use metrics or do you have any metrics? If not sure where to start, again, very much recommended one is mean time to recovery metric, which is also well described in State of DevOps and some of the Just Humble books. And then it's last but not the least, it's progressive rollouts. And this one is, I would say, more question for the development teams as well, because when you roll out something to production, you should have a possibility to actually revert back, or if something is wrong, actually have a rollback strategy. And maybe instead of rolling out to the whole customer base, you can do the canary releases or release your software to some specific groups of customers first. So if you look at DevOps back and try to see connection between actually SRE and DevOps, you can catch that actually it's about culture, measurement, and sharing. So it's the same pillars, so the same principles which was described in the initial DevOps Calms framework and overall mindset. So just to wrap up a bit, I just wanted to say that SRE is actually not a solution or some better way of doing DevOps. It's not a solution for DevOps problems, but it's shared culture and mindset, what is actually a solution for your DevOps problems these days. And here I would like just to quickly show some books, which I believe inspired me a lot while transformation, and which I highly recommend you to take a look at. Thank you.
Okay, thanks Natalia for sharing for this talk and for sharing some of the practices how to actually start with SRE culture. So guys, now it's time actually to ask the questions on the Hopin or Discord. We are collecting it. We still have some time to collect this information. I have to collect questions. So Natalia, I have one general question from myself while waiting for the audience. So in terms of the SRE's duties or the way how teams actually are collaborating and how they are doing their job, uh, had COVID actually changed anything in that? Because it affected the way how people collaborate in general. So have you seen that in your organization? Anything that actually changed, and based on that, actually, perhaps you have some recommendation to our audience here. It's a very topical question, so I mean, we are living in those times for quite some time, I guess. So, what do you think about it?
Thanks for your question. Well, definitely we struggle a bit about this. And now in our specific situation, we're actually still working from home for different reasons, for the policy and the country regulation. However, I would say it's because SRE and DevOps in general is about collaboration and the culture. You have to keep those values and that culture in place, right? Which means you have to still collaborate a lot. And in our case, yeah, we definitely feel the struggle that we can't sit in the one room, do some pair programming or more programming together on the shared TV screen. But we actually find the ways to do that remotely. And since specifically our teams are distributed anyway, so even before COVID times, we're supposed to work from different offices together. I think we actually managed to find the ways and actually the tools which can be pretty much used for the remote sessions. And also we organize so-called drop-in sessions for the team where even if you don't plan to work together with someone on some specific problem, you can drop in and ask your question. And also we sharing on the 2 weekly basis actually what is happening in the SRE and cloud infrastructure in general for developers, and it's actually free for everyone from the tech organization to join. To just drop in if you want to learn what's happening in the other teams.
Okay, thanks. That's a great answer. Do you have any questions from the audience? I think we are still collecting them. So, guys, please don't be shy. Asking questions. It's the opportunity actually for you to ask those questions and hear the answer live. So, please take advantage of it. You can post the questions on the Hopin platform. You can post the question on the Discord channel. You can do it now. If time permits, and if you ask those questions, we'll answer those live. Other than that, there are dedicated channels on Discord to ask the questions and for Natalia actually to follow up those questions. So there are some Discord. Okay, simply some questions on the Discord. So Natalia, please follow the Discord channel to answer the questions. Other than that, I'd like to thank you for your presentation, and we'll have now again short break. In the meantime, guys, please leverage the networking opportunity on the Hopin platform. Take a quick bio break. Be ready for the next session from Paweł Rzepa about serverless security. And also think about now it's actually time for you to plan the event evening. So there is after party. That information will be posted on the Hopin and Discord. So stay tuned for this. So Natalia, once again, thanks for a great talk. Thanks for spending time with us. Let's follow the question and answers on the Discord. And now,
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, anytime. So, guys, quick break, and then we'll speak a few words about serverless security. Thank you, guys.